The first time it happened, nobody in that lecture hall believed their own eyes. It was a Tuesday afternoon, sunlight pouring through those long windows, students scribbling notes, while Professor Malcolm Hughes was halfway through a lesson on the psychology of authority, how some people in uniform confuse power with dominance. He'd just drawn a diagram on the board when the doors slammed open so hard they rattled against the wall. In stomped Officer Trent Mallory, chest puffed out, badge glinting, hand never far from his belt. Security called in a report, suspicious male, pretending to be faculty, he barked. Malcolm stood there, marker in hand, adjusting his glasses, calm as ever. Officer, I'm Dr. Hughes. This is my classroom. Mallory's lip curled. He snatched the professor's ID, glanced at it for less than a second, then sneered. Looks fake. You're coming with me. You could feel the air get sucked out of that room. 20-plus graduate students, staring frozen, some already pulling out their phones. A girl in the front whispered, "That's our professor. He wrote the textbook." But Mallory wasn't listening. He loomed closer, calling Malcolm this individual, refusing to use his name, his title, anything that gave him dignity. That single word, individual, cut sharper than a slur. Now here's the thing about Malcolm Hughes. He wasn't just some academic hiding in an ivory tower. For 15 years, he'd been consulting with the FBI's Behavioral Sciences Division training agents on how to spot authoritarian personality disorders and how bias can twist judgment. He could read people the way most of us read a grocery list. And right there in front of his students, he was watching a live case study unfold. An officer so rigid in his prejudice, he couldn't process reality. He stayed calm, almost too calm. "Here is my faculty identification," Malcolm said, offering it with deliberate slow movements. "Issued by this university photograph seal, all legitimate." Mallory snatched it again, refused to even look at it, and spat out the words, "Probably fake." The silence that followed felt like a gunshot. One student finally spoke up. "Excuse me, officer, that's Dr. Hughes. He's been teaching us all semester." "Ma'am," Mallory growled, "stay out of this. He doesn't belong here." That phrase, "you don't belong here," hung in the air like poison. Malcolm's eyes narrowed just a fraction. He knew what that meant. It wasn't about ID cards anymore. It was about race, about who Mallory thought was allowed to stand at a podium and command respect. And then it escalated. In one swift motion, Mallory twisted Malcolm's wrist behind his back, snapping handcuffs on with a metallic click that echoed off the walls. Students gasped. A girl cried out. Phones shot up higher, recording from every angle. Malcolm winced but didn't resist. Instead, with that steady voice he used in FBI seminars, he told his students, "Observe carefully. This is a textbook example of bias in action." Mallory's face went red. "Are you mocking me?" "Not at all," Malcolm answered softly. "I'm simply noting your behavioral markers." That only fueled the fire. Mallory dragged him out, down the aisle, past shocked faces, out into the corridor, where more faculty and students stopped in disbelief. The dean herself, Florence Hatcher, ran up breathless, demanding to release him. "He's been head of our psychology department for 8 years. Mallory squared his shoulders, sneered. "Ma'am, I don't care who you are. He's under arrest." And right there, you could almost hear his career snap in half. Because the students weren't just shocked anymore. They were live streaming. Within an hour, clips were trending across the country. "Professor arrested for teaching while black." News vans swarmed the campus. The FBI field office lit up with calls. And one of those calls came from Special Agent Camille Torres, who happened to be one of Malcolm's former students. By nightfall, Mallory thought he'd done his job. Instead, he'd lit a fuse. What followed was weeks of firestorm. Every clip replayed his arrogance, dismissing ID, ignoring witnesses, calling a tenured professor an individual. Experts tore it apart on national television. Civil rights attorneys called it a textbook case of racial profiling. And the FBI opened a full investigation, not just into Mallory, but into his entire department. Turns out this wasn't his first time. Digging into his files revealed years of ignored complaints, a black teacher detained on a field trip, a business owner harassed in his own shop, families pulled over for no reason. Each case dismissed, each complaint buried, a pattern too obvious to ignore. And here's where the story flips. Malcolm, the man dragged from his own classroom in cuffs, became the expert witness leading the charge. From his office papers stacked, high phones ringing nonstop, he began breaking down Mallory's behavior with surgical precision. Cognitive rigidity, he explained. Aggression triggered when reality contradicts prejudice. A refusal to process evidence because it challenges the worldview. His words didn't just describe one bad cop. They described a system, and federal prosecutors listened. The trial was brutal. Mallory sat at the defendant's table stone-faced while video after video played. Students testified, faculty testified, the dean testified, and then Malcolm took the stand not as a victim seeking revenge, but as an expert turning pain into teaching. His worldview, Malcolm said calmly, was incompatible with the reality of a black professor with legitimate authority. Faced with that dissonance, he became aggressive instead of adjusting his assumptions. That is not policing. That is pathology. The courtroom was silent. Even the defense attorney stumbled. And when the verdict came, it took the jury less than 2 hours guilty on all counts. Sentencing day, Judge Elena Brooks looked Mallory dead in the eye. Your actions didn't just humiliate a professor. They humiliated the very idea of justice. You have no place in law enforcement. She gave him 10 years in federal prison. For Malcolm, walking free wasn't the end. The university launched the Hughes Institute for Police Psychology. The FBI adopted his framework nationwide. And suddenly the man once dragged out in handcuffs was leading reforms that would outlive them all. But here's the kicker, the story doesn't end neatly. Some people still defend Mallory, saying he was just doing his job. Others argue this proves every officer should face stricter oversight. And Malcolm himself, he said it best in an interview. This isn't about one man's mistake. It's about a culture that rewards refusing to see. So what do you think, was justice served? Or does this case show just how deep the rot goes that credentials reputation? Even truth itself can be erased in seconds if prejudice decides you don't belong. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever seen power abused right in front of you? Do you think stories like this can spark real change? Hit like, subscribe, and share, because voices like ours are the only way lessons like these reach beyond one classroom. And remember, sometimes the most powerful teaching doesn't happen behind a podium. It happens when the whole world is watching what you do when you're wrong.